Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. When Juneteenth came to being a national holiday, and it happened so fast, we really didn't have any time to prepare for it. And so I started wondering, what is it that we should do to celebrate this holiday? And I set the question out to Twitter, and I got some good advice back from someone who said, just sit back and shut up and listen. And I thought, in one respect, he's absolutely right. This is a holiday for us white people to sit back and shut up and listen. But on the other hand, we have Christmas traditions, we have Thanksgiving traditions, we have Halloween traditions, we have a new holiday now. We need some new traditions. And one of those traditions needs to be white people sit down, shut up, and listen. I just thought I would invite in some guests to do some brainstorming on what should we do in the future years to make traditions for Juneteenth. And I've asked Kitty to help me. Hello, Kitty.
Hi, how is everyone tonight?
And I asked Maya Atkinson.
Hi.
And Cynthia McDonald. But Cynthia said she is working and she will be here. And when she gets here, she will jump in. So in the meantime, let's get to brainstorming. Maya, do you have any ideas to start us off with?
Yeah, I'm not sure what area you're in. I'm not asking you to dox yourself or anything like that, but a lot of the bigger cities do have Juneteenth festivals. So growing up in Illinois, I'd never heard of Juneteenth. When I moved to Baltimore, huge festival shuts down like a whole neighborhood in one area of the city. And oh my gosh, food, dancing, like music, a lot of African American vendors selling, whatever they do, whether it's art or again, the food, jewelry, all types of things. It really is kind of a festival of life. And it was through that festival that I actually learned what Juneteenth was, because it's not in, I don't know, they don't feel the need to put it in any of the history books, North or South. Well, I saw Miss Juneteenth on the news, and I guess they do that in Austin. And then there've been, I guess, a number of other ways that cities across the country celebrated as well. And I love having this discussion because it opens it up. A lot of Americans every color have no idea what Juneteenth is and why it's important. If we're going to follow this trend of shutting down the conversation in schools, and yeah, I think it is important to have at least the traditions so that we can keep getting the word out, so that we know what our history is, because apparently we're hell-bent on repeating it. Not necessarily slavery, but just bad trends.
Like how the Republicans today decided to block the Voting Rights Act that they were pressing forward, which marginalized people are the ones that are most impacted by GOP policies like that. And that is like one thing outside of Juneteenth, like just in general, we should be pushing for more voting rights, more representation, more everything to even the playing field. And we need to have accountability for these textbooks in schools that don't talk about Rosewood, that don't talk about Black Wall Street, that don't talk about Juneteenth. Literally, the fact that it's not talked about is a national embarrassment.
It should be. I mean, we all know why they're doing it. I agree with you about evening the playing field, but we both know that that's not what they're interested in doing. We should be interested in a democracy. It's just so ridiculous. Being Black and a woman, I've always had to fight just to be equal. So thinking myself better than someone else or needing that, I mean, it's just never been a thing. And part of me is just like, I can't even understand it. And another part of me is just like, God, would you really want to? Like your mind would just go crazy from the hatred, apparently. What I'm hearing from the Black community is just like, man, this is great, but we were celebrating it anyway. If you really wanted to help us out, you could have done HR1. Like that would have been great. We would have happily have taken that as a win. Having an argument with this guy on Twitter about, you guys are saying you want equality, but you really just want like a handout. And my response was, Black people, when you know that a Black person lives in a home, the price of it is devalued. When you see a black sounding name on a resume, you're less willing to call it. When a Black person's name is affixed to a loan application, they're less likely to get it with the same income, same credit score, same amount of time of credit as a white person, less likely to get into colleges, da 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 da. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking to be set on equal ground. And at what point is not oppressing us, not asking for a handout? We're asking for equality, period. And it would be really nice if anyone that mattered, not that you guys don't matter, but I'm talking about like policymakers, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody that has the actual ability to change things on the ground level. Nobody's saying that white people are bad, white people are evil. Nobody's trying to demonize anybody. Again, it's just straight equality. All we're asking for is equality.
Do you think the whole Juneteenth holiday was kind of throwing a bone at you rather than allowing for any real kind of change?
There's no change.
Well, that's what I mean, is
Yeah.
in lieu
And that's
of any change, that,
right.
it was something to throw to say, hey, we're doing something in the political arena, even though they've done something that really didn't help in any way.
It's a symbolic victory.
I think the Derek Chauvin conviction did more for the Black community than the Juneteenth holiday. Again, while I'll take the Derek Chauvin conviction because it is right and just, there's a lot of questioning about whether or not that is real or significant change as well.
To me, and like, I admit I'm a bit cynical, a bit jaded. My partner Michael is Black and Indian. He's mixed. It doesn't matter. The thing is, his father had faced discrimination when he came here from Guyana, being dark skinned and a foreigner. Like, he served the country, he fought in multiple wars in the army. Like, he every bit earned, his citizenship more than a lot of people in this country that sit on their asses and do nothing, but were just born here.
Yeah.
And ultimately, to say that somebody that literally did the American dream, came from a country that had nothing, joined the military because they knew it would give them citizenship, and fight their way up to a comfortable middle class life, that is like the dream that they feed to everybody, but then they still shit on them even when they accomplish that. It boggles my mind that with the whole Juneteenth thing, I was like, it's great, it's nice, but to me, it's, the whole lipstick on a pig, it's doing something symbolic without any fundamental change. I mean, it's literally like Starbucks putting rainbow fucking cups out during Pride. Redlining literally kept Black people from being able to partake in federal programs to help build generational wealth and get them out of those lower rungs. Most white people in this country, I'm not going to say all, but a lot of them benefited from policies that deliberately disenfranchise others to help their families accrue wealth over generations. And there are plenty of poor white people too. So like, it's not that all of them are.
Right.
But when you deliberately exclude an entire group of people from a government program meant to help lift people up from poverty and give them a fresh start to help them grow and to help the country grow with them, come to today where like the effects of that are still being felt in these communities, and be like, well, we can't give them more because, I mean, they're not slaves anymore, they've got rights, they can vote, like they're just Americans. If we give them anything more, then it's just a handout. It's like, no, you need to level the playing field. It is literally like telling every fucking racial group to run a marathon, but before you let the people of color run, you're fucking taking their shoes, so they got no bootstraps to pull themselves up by, and then you're shooting them in the fucking kneecaps and telling them to run while they're starting half a mile behind everybody else. Like, you are literally doing everything you can systemically to disadvantage these people, and then you point to the fact that there are really bad neighborhoods, there are really bad problems in the inner cities, and it's like, they have crap education systems because our education system is tied to property taxes, and if you don't have a good education, you have almost no prospect for moving up in this world. Full stop. So if they can't provide for themselves one way, then, poverty is the number one driver to crime. It has nothing to do with your skin color. It has whether or not to do with you come from any kind of money or privilege, be that lower, middle class, or above. If you even just have a little bit, you're less likely to get involved in crime. And then that's a vicious cycle where you get kids for petty things in high school, get them in the system, and then you just keep fucking churning out this thing of moving them from juvie to like, and it escalates, and it ruins lives, it ruins families, and it keeps that community down. I can't help but see it as the feature, not the bug.
Right. Poverty is a gateway drug to most of society's ills. I mean, outside of rich people. They know what they're doing. Poverty, it's the new slavery.
Well, I mean, technically, slavery is still legal in this country if you're imprisoned.
Which is where a lot of our Black men are.
Pretty much end up. Like, even California knows that, like, they'd be fucked if they didn't have their volunteer firefighting force prisoners that have no say in the matter.
I mean, just like with the Civil War, where you had most of the soldiers were Black. So it's like, all right, well, you go fight for us. And if you get burned up, like, nobody will care except, the people who fucking love you. But then they get out, they have this experience, and they can't go work for the fire department.
Because we treat felons like shit in this country. Even if you're fucking put away for a non-violent, victimless crime of possession of drugs or using drugs, which I don't believe should be a crime. I mean, there are people serving life imprisonment for fucking marijuana, yet half the country has at least medical marijuana, if not full-on legal recreational marijuana at this point. And nobody's, like, some people are talking about it, but not enough are talking about, hey, maybe we shouldn't be locking these people up. Maybe we should let them go and expunge their records for nonviolent drug offenses, because those people don't deserve to be in prison. If they had an addiction, put them in treatment, but don't
Right.
lock them up and ruin their lives, branding them with felon, where they're not going to be able to get housing in some places. They're not going to be able to get jobs. The reason why we have such a high recidivism rate in this country is because we focus on being punitive and punishing people who do wrong rather than trying to correct the issue.
I mean, and let's be real, in larger cities, cops are hunting young Black men. The real reason we have such a high recidivism rate is, well, one, racism, two, private prisons, which should be illegal.
Absolutely, they should be illegal.
When I used to be a conservative, I definitely never understood the issue of over-policing. If anything, I thought under-policing was the issue, that, if we just had more police, there would be less crime.
Do you remember like when they stopped doing the stop and frisk, and they were shocked that crime kept going down? It's like, well, how are you going to keep all the Black people in line if you don't over-police them? Maybe we're just normal people that you treat us with dignity and respect. We do normal things.
It seems like it's still so ingrained in our society that a person of color counts less than a white person.
No, I started only going out, like anytime that I needed to do things in public, I would do it immediately after work. So I'd be in like my work clothes, because when I'm dressed professionally, people don't follow me around the same way they do if I'm in like jeans and a t-shirt. If I'm in jeans
I think
and
you're one of the
t-shirt,
good ones. You're one of the professional ones.
Depending on how you dress, people talk to me differently when I'm dressed differently. Yeah, it's annoying.
Even
I
my
was really
partner's got-
surprised that you said that you hadn't heard of Juneteenth until you were an adult, because although you didn't spend any particular amount of time on it, and I don't remember exactly what year it was, I do recall discussing it in high school when I was a kid, and that was
In
back
Alabama?
No, in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in Wisconsin.
Gotcha. Okay.
And
That makes way more
Wisconsin
sense.
Wisconsin was considered a really liberal state at the time when I lived there, although it's become much more conservative now. But
Recently,
we didn't go into any detail, but we did talk about it, along with, our study of the Civil War.
We discussed
My
the Emancipation Proclamation. That was about it. I mean, it was noted that it took some states a bit longer to release all the slaves, but nobody talked about Juneteenth.
I mean, I was in my fucking mid-20s when I first learned of Rosewood and Black Wall Street and the atrocities committed there. So I went to high school in Florida. We learned about the Civil War. We learned about the Emancipation Proclamation and how not all the slaves were, freed right away, that it did take time, but that was it. They left it at that. It's just, we're doing a disservice to this country and to our children by not teaching these things.
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to say hello to Cynthia. Thank you for being able to join us. I know you have had such a busy day today.
Yeah, because until somebody pay me reparations, I gotta work. So, so I would like to tell you all how I commemorated mostly Juneteenth.
Okay.
So this past weekend, my partner and one of my very good friends, who is the president of our advocacy group in Chicago, were invited to speak at a rally in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was a great event. It was hot as fuck. We're 2 minutes in, right? So I can say fuck, right? Cool. It was hot as fuck. So they actually were invited to speak on freedmen history and Juneteenth, and also why it's important to still push for policy to make Black Americans whole. So we did that Friday. We got a chance to really meet people and talk to our, newfound friends. It felt like a family reunion. One of the things that I really loved about it is that we all got a chance to really start to speak to one another and also talk about what this means to us as Black Americans, even though we have this policy, but to be honest, Juneteenth in some shape, way, or form has been recognized since 1866.
Yeah.
And then in the late 1970s is when Texas actually ratified it as a holiday. I believe 1979, 1980. And then you had domino effects of different municipalities and then states that actually recognized Juneteenth. I believe by the time, I want to say in 2018, 2019, about 47 states recognize Juneteenth in some shape, way, and form. And then I know that my job specifically ratified Juneteenth as a company holiday, and so we all got the day off. Yeah. So unfortunately George Floyd died, and that's kind of why they said, you know what? I think that we should do something to kind of commemorate, to help out Black employees. So I'm gonna give them Juneteenth. Okay, let's do that. And I'm like, but but that's neither here nor there. Going back to my story. Now, one of the things that we kind of like settled on, myself and the others that, were the organizers of the rally, is that we wanted to do something like this every year, because Juneteenth should not just be a day that, people get together and have a barbecue. Even though I don't necessarily have issues with people having cookouts and barbecues and having a good time, but at the same time, this was a day to remember those who did not know that they were emancipated until much later, after the rest of the Union announced the emancipations of slaves. We are in a very interesting moment in American history, because even though we have a federally recognized holiday about Juneteenth, which I look at it as an acknowledgement of guilt. Like, America, you're basically saying, yeah, you own slaves and that was shitty. But you also have folks that is trying to come up with very ahistorical remnants of what American history is, with the fighting of critical race theory, or coming up with some bastardized curriculum when it comes to how we teach, what American history really is. So if we actually really get into the question, like, how should we celebrate Juneteenth? Word to your mother, asexual atheist. How do we really celebrate Juneteenth? I was invited to moderate a virtual event hosted by my job through our employee-led team called the Black Affinity Network Group. And we invited a couple of speakers to speak on Juneteenth and history and things of that nature. And one of the speakers that I invited specifically to come, because I knew that she was going to bring the funk, made me damn near cry, and I was trying to hold it in. She really brought home the atrocities that slaves actually endured, and really got through like the real reason why slavery was even thought of to be part of the reason why we should abolish it in the midst of the Civil War. It wasn't necessarily because Abraham Lincoln and the majority of Congress was really about getting rid of slavery. It was more so because the North was losing the war and they needed some fighting soldiers. So they said, hey, let's go ahead and free slaves and they can go ahead and join our ranks. And that's really what turned the tide of the war, starting with the Massachusetts troop in the 54th Regiment. Check out Glory, great movie. So when she really started to bring home the toil of these people, and now we want to make this a holiday, she said, celebrate what? And I was like, ooh, that hit me home, because like everybody's like, yay, we got this holiday. But think about where we get this holiday from. It wasn't like something feel good that happened. Slavery was a horrible, horrible, horrible institution. And even though like you even have like textbooks that came out of South Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama, and some other southern states about how slaves were happy, that's exactly false.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I'm really concerned about, especially with Juneteenth, is now that it's a federal holiday, is the whole notion of bringing this commercialization to the holiday. I promise you all, I might lose my breath if I see a Juneteenth mattress sale. I'm just letting you know right now.
Oh my God. You've been watching Black Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter is a blessing and a curse at the same time, is it not? So I take this as a time that this really needs to be a teachable moment, and really just get into like what it is, how we got to be America, what really made America a first world country. Even though I know that first world is usually, it's not very.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah, but like, it became an economic superpower because of free labor. Yeah, like cotton was king, along with tobacco and indigo and some other products. And we can point to so many different buildings, educational institutions in the capital of our United States of America, where these buildings were built by slaves.
What you're saying made me want to bring up the topic of what allyship looks like from the non-Black community. One of my bigger issues is like, okay, well, I understand it has to be June 19th, but now it's this holiday that comes after school's out. Most children may not even know that it's there. Is there any teaching? And it's nice to have a day off if in fact you get one. But when we're talking about celebrating it, I guess the question really is, what does allyship look like?
That's a very good question.
Because we're not teaching kids. We're actually, a lot of states are moving. Teachers are either going to be fined, imprisoned, definitely fired for mentioning anything close to this.
Yeah. That's the egregious part, right?
Yeah.
That, people can actually lose their livelihoods for telling the truth.
Right.
I always ask myself, like, I just don't understand why people do these things, right? But at the same time, I completely understand it because they already did it over and over and over again. It's kind of like monkey see, monkey do. And these actions are really not new.
They've never stopped. It just looks different.
Yeah, these institutions kind of just like, overturn or reinvent themselves in some other shape, way, or form in some type of oppressive state. And it's constantly like you just mentioned, it's a fight. I believe that part of it is not only just remembering what happened and just be committed to telling the truth. And I want to kind of just touch a little bit about what does allyship look like. And part of it, of allyship specifically, is also you who happen to not be Black to also be committed to telling the truth, and recognizing, what the truth is and making it your business to make sure that the truth is taught. This is our history.
Yeah.
And I had a friend who was also speaking at the rally who personally said that I don't want an ally. I said, well, what do you want? He said, I want co-conspirators. I said, ooh.
I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Any individual group of minorities is such a minority of the country. Allyship is the better route.
Well, I would say this, Maya. I think of back in 1988 when the Civil Liberties Act was signed into law by Ronald Reagan, which was the payment of $20,000 to Japanese internment victims during World War II, and or their direct descendants if the person who was interned was no longer living. And one of the main bodies of people that supported and really pushed the president and Congress and different ones involved to make sure that became a law was the Congressional Black Caucus.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were actively involved in making sure the commission happened. And once they came up with what they wanted to do, that happened. Even though like co-conspirator sounds like a bit extreme, but that's kind of what happened. These weren't people to say, yeah, that should happen. No, they made it happen. And that's when Representative John Conyers got the idea to come up with HR 40 and then introduced it in Congress a year later after the Civil Liberties Act was signed. If we want to do allyship and if we want to really say like, how can you stand in solidarity with the African American community on these things? It's to say, help us fight these things too. If we got like, Christians listening, you pick up your cross and walk.
Right.
Where's our Benjamins? You remember Benjamin? Come on, you former Christians. You know that story.
You talking about Benjamin, the younger brother of Joseph?
Benjamin was the one when Jesus was on his way to the Mount Calvary and he stumbled. I think that the third time that he stumbled, they made
Simon of Cyrene.
Simon of Cyrene. My bad. Simon of Cyrene. Thank you.
I love story time with Cynthia. Like when she's on a roll, man, you just sit back and smile and nod, and it's just great.
Granny knows her Bible. I know that's right. But that's the thing. But like he helped pick up Jesus's cross and helped him walk up to Golgotha to Calvary in order for him to get crucified. I mean, it's kind of fucked up what happened, but still, he helped him to an end goal. And that's what allyship looks like to me. It's other people who belong to other communities who recognize that America did a job on African Americans who built the country, and it's time for them to recognize this, redress this, and then commit closure. And that's what we really need.
When you first mentioned, getting your Benjamins, I thought, what, $50 bills?
I think that's $100 bill, to be honest with you.
No, I just checked because I couldn't remember if it was 50 or 100 either. But yeah, it's 50.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I saw either of those. So.
I know, right? But yeah, that's what allyship looks like to me. Like, if somebody really says that they're an ally, I'm like, okay, are you gonna help me with this fight? You gonna help me call some congressmen? I mean, check this out. Alone, the George Floyd policing bill is still chilling in the Senate. Ain't even up for a vote. The anti-lynching bill that Cory Booker and Kamala Harris introduced when Kamala was still a senator is still chilling in the Senate. Has not come up for a vote. Those two alone. I mean, and I mean, not even talking about HR 40. That just
if they were trying to like throw us a bone, the anti-lynching one would have been.
That's a layup. Yeah. That's an easy layup.
Right.
Like, the least that you can do.
I mean, promise more than
it's more than the symbolic victory of naming Juneteenth a national holiday, because to the people it matters to, it already was. It didn't matter if it was recognized by the government or not. Right. The community that it is for celebrated it. They recognized it, and they didn't need authorization to do so.
The problem is, so often African Americans, when it comes to policy, get symbolism. We really haven't seen any transformative policy per se since the 1960s. And even those were piecemeal, because there's still a racial wealth gap. There's still an income gap. Even African American housing ownership is lower than it was in the 60s.
One of the things that really gets me is the voting rights issues. My own Congressman, Mo Brooks, was one of the people pushing for some of the legislation even here in Alabama to reduce voting rights. And he was arguing, well, anyone who says that requiring an ID is a penalty to Black people is insulting Black people, because it's no harder for a Black person to get an ID than it is, a white person.
Oh my gosh. I was arguing with an asshole about that the other day. And he was like, why, you have to go into a bank and you have to if you want to cash a check, or if you want to get on a plane, or, something else he was saying. And I'm like, yeah, the issue isn't that we don't want to show ID. Don't require us to do something that you're then making harder to get. Like, you're closing down MVAs, you're moving them out to where, we can't even, like, you have to take a bus to get to a bus to get to the bus.
That's right.
Building, you make it damn near impossible. And then you're just like, what? Like, it's right over there.
A lot of over there for you.
A lot of people can't just get into their car.
Right.
Because, again,
you got a car.
You've impoverished them. And so a car is a big expense. There's a lot that goes into a car that a lot of us have the luxury of taking for granted. But the poor, when you're still struggling just to food on the table or to pay rent, there's so many people I know where they have to take a check plus part of another check to pay rent. And then you're talking to them about, like, first you have to go over there to get an ID that you don't necessarily need, because nobody in this community has an ID. So the people that are doing business in the area have made it exceedingly convenient for people without IDs to do business. A lot of them are very sharky, like check cashing places. I mean, there aren't a lot of banks. People figure it out. A lot of places, your work ID, it has your name and your face, and your work isn't going to give you a fake ID. A lot of places accept the work ID as your ID, and people just get by. And he was like, well, how do they get on a plane? And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have never left their side of town. They can point in the general direction of the airport like they've never been in it. I don't know. If you care to be an ally and not a dick, there are a lot of conservative allies, a lot of people who are in red state and have only heard the Fox News talking points, and they understand that Black people are saying stuff, and they want to be supportive, but they just don't get it. Don't just grab any random Black person, but there are enough of us willing to have the conversation where you can go to seek out the information if you need to have a conversation. If you're in a stream like this, you see me, you see Cynthia, you see, oh gosh, I feel so bad. I totally forgot her name. Who's the other nurse?
Oh, Jenna.
Thank you. There are a lot of Black atheists in the community that are so willing to have the talk with you, whether it be on stream or Discord or what have you. I've done this a lot in the trans community. It wouldn't occur to me to walk up to a random trans person on the street and, tell me about the struggle. But when I see people on YouTube and I befriend people and we're in Discord, I can have these conversations. What does this look like? And this is allyship.
I was even talking with my partner, because, like, specifically when we're talking about, like, this dog eat dog, that portion specifically that, like, seems to be very prevalent in our community. And the thing about it is that I sometimes think, or observe rather, that the worst of what America is, especially like what we glorify, starts to even like creep up even more so and even more in your face when you're looking at the African American community, because the African American community is definitely a reflection of what America is. And when I say that, I mean this. One of the things that critical race theory talks about specifically is about race being a social construct. And one of the things that I kind of want you all to imagine is this. Every slave insurrection that happened on American soil, if it was thwarted, most likely was thwarted by another enslaved person. Have any of you all heard of the term meritorious manumission?
No.
Loosely, what meritorious manumission is basically kind of empowering some of your slaves to be kind of spies on other ones, so they can kind of tell on, the other slaves if they're trying to, to escape, to take over, et cetera, or even if they're not doing their work properly. And one of the really egregious portions of slavery was that a lot of slave owners would damn near starve their slaves to death. And some of them would be rewarded if they told on other slaves for doing whatever. And oftentimes they were rewarded by a hot butter biscuit.
Stockholm Syndrome before Stockholm Syndrome was a thing.
Right. And one of the things, if we kind of fast forward now, And especially if you look at like your Candace Owens or your Jesse Lee Peterson, they found a niche in white supremacy specifically to kind of insert themselves in that way in order for them to, you know, basically shit on their own people, but they are rewarded in some shape, way, or form with the platform, with money, with this, that, and the other, because
they make a lot of money.
They make a whole
an
lot
egregious amount of money.
A fucked up amount of terms
like
of money.
Enough money to not need to work ever again and just shut the shit down.
But see, that's the thing. Like, one of the things that we have learned specifically in America, and I'm pretty sure it shows up in different places around the world, because white supremacy isn't just an institution here, right?
No.
Is that if you find yourself to be able to kind of insert yourself in some shape or way in this hierarchy, you are rewarded. I remember, I want to say sometime last year, when In Black and White was still on streaming, they did a story about this lady who was in this the city of township of Evanston. Maya, you're familiar with Evanston.
Oh yeah.
And she specifically recorded a group of people who had a Confederate flag on a public beach tied to the fence where they were sitting. She was like, "Wait a minute, is that a Confederate in the North? Wait, what? Hold on." So she went ahead and she came back and she started to record, and she said, "I want you all to see this. This is in the city I live in, that you are actually having a group of people just chilling with the Confederate flag right here in what's supposedly a very diverse area." It gets better though. But here's the thing. So when she started to record and she did a live on Facebook of what she was actually seeing, you know who was defending the man for being able to have a Confederate flag on a public beach in front of everybody to see?
Jesse Lee Peterson.
No. It was another man of color. I think that he may have been either like Middle Eastern or may have been Indian. Yeah. And he was defending this white man's right to actually have a Confederate flag up. And then she said, "Do you understand when I look at that flag, what that means to me as a Black woman in America?" It's the same thing about how a Jewish person would look at a swastika.
A Nazi flag, yeah.
Right. Why are you defending this person talking about freedom of speech? And to be honest with you, the Confederacy was a treasonous organization.
It really was. I don't understand why it's legal. I'm so pro freedom of speech, but like the country that tried to overthrow the country, we shouldn't be allowed to wait. I don't understand how it's legal.
We shouldn't have military bases named after Confederate fucking generals. Like,
no,
the Confederate flag is literally the participation trophy for the treasonous losers in the South.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they are.
It'd be like naming something after like
Benedict Arnold.
Any of the men that bombed the Twin Towers, any of the kamikaze pilots. It's the exact same thing, and we just wouldn't dare.
But the part that I really want you all to kind of focus on a little bit is who was defending him. And she kept on saying it like, "I don't understand how you, a person of color, is defending this person." And I said in the chat, I said, "I do." I said, "This is how those who want to inject themselves in some shape, way, or form in the hierarchy of white supremacy, that's how they respond to things." And it's always been something that has been codified in our institutions and in our systems for centuries. There were approximately 20,000 slaves in the United States over the when chattel slavery was an institution that were owned by other Black people. Now, some of them who were freed may have purchased their own freedom or what have you, may have purchased the freedom of family members so that they can, lead the institution as well.
So yeah, that definitely happened.
Was that, but to your point, Maya, other groups of people like the 5 civilized tribes, a good chunk of a lot of their population were African American slaves. I remember even looking at photographs from the 1800s of some indigenous people, nation chieftains that actually had on very westernized clothing, hair was cut. Even some of them actually denounced their particular religion and then took on Christianity. And then part of like that portion was owning slaves. And also keep this in mind too. Where did they purchase the slaves? Who did they purchase the slaves from? And it's so multi-layered, but it's so fucked up. This whole notion of how white supremacy actually like shows up even in our community, even to the point where it reflects in our behavior towards one another. So it's something to keep in mind when it comes to even how when we're even thinking about crabs in the bucket. This is nothing but another inception of meritorious manumission.
And there's a lot of white people in this country that have never seen a Black person.
Right.
And so if all you get is what you see on like, what do you call it, NYPD Blue or whatever the hell's on now. I don't watch much TV. But in the 80s, we were always drug dealers. We were always in jail. We were always single moms. We were always in the ghetto. We were always trying to make a come up. Like, that's what you saw. And there's a lot of racism against Black Americans in other countries because that's what we ship out to them. And so that's what they get to see. We have a lot of immigrants fighting their parents, first generation Americans fighting their immigrant parents. Like, why are you around Black people? Like, they're bad people. Like, there's just something in the Black gene that, makes them bad.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's scientific. Continue.
Yeah. It's socialized, and we get it within our own community too. We need to start with education, re-education. And I know that's going to be an uphill battle because they don't want us educated. It's not going to get better until we're actually seen as people. I really wish if we could get it on TV or whatever, like changing the narrative. What is a Black person?
Yeah, I mean, like, education is definitely a big component of it, and it has to be to the point where when we're telling the truth. I mean, I cannot stress that enough. I don't completely wrap my head around why we as a nation want to be so ahistorical, and I suppose I do, because if we really tell the truth about what happened in America, how America became what it really is, and all the different things that has happened to marginalized communities to make America great, it would actually show that maybe we are not as great as we like to purport ourselves to be. Right? I know personally, I don't see myself going somewhere else. I mean, I have a life here. I have family here. And when I see myself as an American, right? I see myself as a United States citizen, point blank, period. So I usually have like a lot of back and forth with like some, I like to call them like wokey online that come up with, oh, we need to leave America. We need to annex ourselves. We need to take over the country. I was like, child, stop that mess. To be honest with you, African Americans has a 400+ year investment right here in the United States. If you say we need to leave America, where are we going to go? I love it. Like sometimes, like if you hear like a racist that's like overtly racist and they say go back to Africa, I'm like, which country? Africa got 54 countries, about 3,000 different tribes. They speak over 2,000 different languages, dialects, and it's highly colonized. So where am I going to go, sir? Where?
But I mean, like, we don't even know, right? Because that was stripped from us.
Yeah, I mean, like, exactly.
I talk to my husband. He'll tell you, I'm Scotch Irish. Me, I'm Mississippi. Like that's
right. What Beyonce say? My mama Louisiana, my daddy Alabama.
Right.
So you got to put us together. And I'm a Texas. Anyway. And I mean, like,
and that's what we are. Like where we hail from was the state that we were our ancestors, our grandmother's grandmother.
Correct.
Was enslaved in.
That was for me, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia. I actually traced like my eldest relative on my father's side to Virginia. And I thought it was kind of telling because I found that in the census when I was looking up my family tree, that my great grandfather on my dad's side was a World War I veteran. I didn't even know. And so if I think about if I come from 2 generations of veterans. If I think about, I come from chattel slavery that, where you had a whole group of people that was very much so part of building the infrastructure that is what we know as the United States. We are invested in here. And when we talk about policies to make us whole, that's the least that America can do.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in your thoughts on this comment. We should have the mind of children when it comes to race. Children don't recognize color. Racism is taught.
Yeah, it is.
Yes and no. I don't like the don't see race conversations. We're not there yet. When I hear people talking about not seeing race, not just race, a number of factors, it leads to more bigoted behavior. Again, I'm a diversity and inclusion trainer, so I value diversity. When you talk about diversity and inclusion, it's not just so much the diversity, because I said this on a different stream where, you can have a white woman, a black woman, an Asian woman, if they all, were brought up upper middle class and they're all Christian and they all went to similar schools and have a similar background, you have the same woman up there. The part about diversity is diversity of thought, the experiences, the background, what makes you you. Bringing those different experiences to the table. You have blinders. There are things that you can't see. The beautiful part about diversity is when you collaborate, when you allow for the inclusion, you're bringing all these wealth of experiences that this other person has into your world. You're learning more, you're growing as an individual, and you can truly help make the world a better place because now you have the resources you need to see the things that you didn't know. When we talk about, well, I don't see race, it's like, well, you should, because these, you should be having the conversations. You should be asking the questions. I could say, well, a trans woman is just a woman. And so I need to understand what she's gone through to be who she is right now. that fight is really important. And what I'm seeing, who she is to me today, getting through that fight, that struggle, is a huge part of that. And to say, well, all trans women are women to me, so I'm just going to treat her like a woman. Like it feels like I'm leaving out a lot. If she doesn't want to talk about it, that's one thing. But for me to just not see it seems I'm hurting myself in that aspect.
I agree with you. I think we need to address the issues of racism, and I think racism is something that is taught rather than inbred. But on the other hand, race incorporates culture, and when we ignore race, we ignore culture. And not all people of color are of the same culture. There are African people, there's Jamaican people, there's South American people, there's Indian people, there's Asian. I'm sorry, I don't even want to say Asian because that is another group that incorporates so many different cultures.
Sure.
And to say I don't see race is to say I don't see culture to me.
Well, I like to take a stab at that a minute, because I think that one of the things that we should understand specifically when it comes to race and culture is that they're not really the same thing. No. Race itself is a social construct, but cultures and ethnicities are very much so the way that, based on the group that you're part of, the environment that you were brought up in, oftentimes it can very much so be adjacent to the nationality that you are, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, because Black Americans themselves have a culture that's different from, persons who come from the continent of Africa, right? Even Jamaicans who maybe have a different culture, cultural norms that maybe from a person that's from Guyana, et cetera, right? We still have these different portions of us that makes us a global community. But, when it comes to racism itself, yes, racism is taught, but I think that another thing that we have to also understand specifically about racism is that we're not just working on racism definition 1.0 any longer, right? We're dealing with also how racism has bled into institutions, right? It actually rules how we do business, how we teach, how we hire, how we basically do anything and everything that matters in America. Racism is always the component of that. And I would definitely say if we want to start dismantling these systems, it does have to start individually, and then individuals have to come together to commit to making the systems on a macro level go away. And even though especially since racism is so codified in the American fabric, we know it's going to take time. Buildings don't come down just like that. Sometimes you have to actually come up with plans to even take something down and then even come up with another plan to put something in its place. So it definitely takes a commitment on a macro level in order for this thing to actually become a reality. But you also have to want to do the committed work. It has to be to the point where we understand that racism actually hurts all of us. It doesn't really allow us to appreciate, like you said, Maya, the differences that we all have. I loved when I was growing up when my mom would take me to different cultural events in Chicago that were different from our own, because I get a chance to meet new people. I get a chance to try new foods, and y'all know I love to eat. I get a chance to learn things that I didn't know before. And then in turn, we have an exchange and they can learn from me. And I kind of wish that we had that mindset as a people, but we don't, because we're just so married to, I'm just so me and this, that, and the third. But we have to also understand we're not just an enclave to ourselves. We can kind of get in our heads that it's okay to be part of a global community where we celebrate each other's differences.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for 90 minutes now, so I think we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up. I think what we really got out of this is the number one thing that we need to do as a Juneteenth celebration is to listen and to learn our own history. Let the celebrations be a focus on what we did wrong in history and what we can do to try to bring right to our communities.
Yeah, and again, Black people aren't trying to punish white people. It's a narrative propagated by politicians so that they and the rich buddies can stay rich. I want to allow my kid to go outside and play and not worry if he's going to get shot.
Right.
But for
one thing.
Yeah, for one thing. But I mean, for a lot of us, it's just know the history. The history of America is our history too. There are a lot of things I'm ashamed of. I'm ashamed of how America treated Japanese Americans, Native Americans, women. I don't have to be a victim to understand that atrocities have been committed. I think it's important to understand, to learn, understand, and to do your best to support the support systems that need to be in place so that we can all move forward as a collective together.
And I would just say that with Juneteenth, the way that we should really remember it is, again, piggyback on Godless Granny and Maya, that yes, we should not be ahistorical. We definitely should acknowledge what made America America, and it is slavery. And we should do the proper things to actually fix the first citizens. which is us. Well, I would definitely say this, and it's not to slight anybody else, but like even when I was on other streams and I talk about first citizenship, it's never to downplay any other group of people. I don't do that. I'm a daughter of an immigrant, but we have to recognize that what we know now as citizenship and how we define citizenship in America now is because of the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment came about after the abolishment or the emancipation of slaves.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say first citizens, I mean exactly that. What we know about citizenship is because of that. And there's certain things that citizens should expect from their government that African Americans have not gotten. I wanted to give this little brief nugget, and I want you all to really let it sit with you for a second. The Homestead Act of 1862. Millions of acres of land was damn near given away for free to whites at the time, and even white immigrants at the time. And this particular policy lasted for almost 150 years. But at large part, this particular policy was something that African Americans could not take advantage of. With the particular act, not only were they given free land, they also got county agents so they can learn to mechanize the land to make money off of it. And they were given land grants to build colleges to educate people. Okay, there's a lot of universities going towards the West that actually became a thing because of the Homestead Act of 1862. And you have approximately 43 to 48 million white Americans that are living off of the wealth of that one policy to this day. But African Americans, about 13% of the population. We're like, especially like those who come from chattel slavery is only like about 35 million, just opposed to even like 25% of white families are worth over $1 million. As opposed to African American families, only 4% of them are worth over $1 million. And I can go on and on, but I understand that we're wrapping up.
No, we even saw something similar. We saw something similar happen after World War I. With exactly. The FHA. With
the GI Bill, my father couldn't. My father fought in Korea, and he couldn't get the GI Bill.
Pulled Black people into projects. Mm-hmm. While the white people got damn near free houses in the suburbs.
Correct. This is the type of stuff. Yeah, we're wrapping because I know we're not about to go for another hour. But I'm just saying, these are the different things that that we're talking about. When I'm saying redress and repair, I'm talking about the same stuff. The federal government made a thing in order to actually create a wealth class of people is because they were citizens and they had a social contract with them to do so. Is the same thing that we are saying to this day that the government owes its first citizens. Happy Juneteenth, everybody.